The Capitol building buzzed with tension. News crews circled like hawks. Staffers whispered in corners, and the hearing room was packed shoulder to shoulder. AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, sat poised, expression calm but eyes sharp, her signature bold red lip unflinching. Across from her, Kash Patel adjusted his tie, leaned back slightly in his seat, and smiled. But it wasn't a smile of ease, it was readiness. This wasn't just another oversight hearing. This was the televised face-off everyone in Washington had been waiting for. Two high-profile figures, polar opposites in worldview, meeting under the bright lights with America watching. AOC had requested Patel's testimony personally. The official reason? To clarify inconsistencies in a classified report Patel had reviewed during his time as a senior national security advisor. The real reason? She saw a chance to corner one of Trump's fiercest defenders, live, unfiltered, and undeniable. Patel knew this. And unlike many others who might squirm under the pressure, he welcomed it. As the gavel struck and Representative Jamie Raskin called the hearing to order, the room fell to a hush. The opening statements were formal, calculated, political theater at its finest. But the anticipation wasn't for Raskin, nor the other members of the committee. It was for what would happen when AOC finally got her turn to speak, and for how Patel would respond. Outside, protesters chanted and waved signs, some in support of Patel, others warning of disinformation. On X, formerly Twitter, hashtags like #Patel versus AOC and #Live Showdown were already trending. And inside the room, under hot camera lights, Kash Patel cracked his knuckles once, then folded his hands calmly on the table. This wasn't just testimony. This was war in a suit and tie. And the first shot was about to be fired. "Mr. Patel," AOC began, leaning slightly toward the microphone, "you've testified under oath that you had no prior contact with outside intelligence contractors while serving as Chief of Staff to the Acting Secretary of Defense. Is that correct?" Kash didn't blink. "I did." Her brows arched, not out of surprise, but performance. "And yet," she continued, lifting a stack of documents from her folder, "we have here emails, texts, and even a conference invite showing otherwise. So I'll ask again. Did you lie under oath, or are you lying now?" The room stirred. Phones went up. News crews subtly zoomed in. This was AOC in her element. Direct, prosecutorial, and media savvy. She wasn't asking for information, she was setting a trap. Kash leaned forward. "What you have," he said slowly, "are communications between the Department of Defense and registered security liaisons that were approved under standing protocols. I didn't contact them. I executed policy in coordination with them. There's a difference. If you read the email headers—" "I have," she snapped. He smiled faintly. "Then you'd know better than to quote them out of context." The committee members shifted uncomfortably. AOC was known for her sharp questioning, but Kash Patel wasn't folding. He wasn't nervous. He was prepared. "And let me be clear," he continued, voice cool. "I've seen this tactic before. Twist the facts, grab the clip, and hope people don't look deeper. But I'll save them the time." He tapped the microphone. "I'll release every document after this hearing. You want transparency? So do I." That landed. Even the reporters in the back sat up straighter, because that wasn't deflection. It was a challenge. AOC, for the first time in the hearing, hesitated. Not long, just a flicker, but enough for the camera to catch it. Kash had shifted the dynamic. She was no longer the only one asking questions. "I'll remind the witness," she said stiffly, "this isn't your press conference." "And I'll remind the Congresswoman," Kash replied, "this is still America. I'm allowed to defend myself." The chamber echoed with murmurs. One aide whispered, "Oh, this is going viral." Because for once, it wasn't a shouting match. It was a dismantling, calm, controlled, and public, and it was just getting started. "Let's talk about January 6th, AOC said, her voice sharper now. The room tensed. Cash's posture didn't shift, but his eyes narrowed just slightly. "You were serving in a senior role at the Pentagon that week," she continued, flipping to another tabbed page in her binder. "And yet there's no record. No public statement, no internal memo from you urging deployment of National Guard until hours after the Capitol was breached. Why?" A carefully timed pause. Cameras blinked. The committee chair leaned in. Kash cleared his throat, not to stall, but to make sure every syllable hit. "Because I wasn't playing Twitter politics," he said. "I was securing the Vice President, the Speaker of the House, and ensuring lethal force wasn't used recklessly against civilians. My job wasn't to posture, it was to act." AOC didn't flinch. "That sounds convenient." "Convenient?" His voice rose, just enough to quiet the room. "Tell that to the National Guard units I coordinated with in real time. Tell that to the Capitol police officers who shook my hand 2 days later. You're not just attacking me, Congresswoman. You're smearing people who wore body armor and took orders while this building was under siege." For a second, the room froze. Then the murmur, a shift. He wasn't just defending himself now. He was pulling others into the circle. People viewers respected, people AOC couldn't attack without backlash. And he knew it. But she wasn't done. "You can wrap it in patriotism all you want," she said, "but this isn't about the troops, it's about accountability. And you, like many in the last administration, seem allergic to it." Kash leaned forward, elbows resting on the table, eyes locked on hers. "I've testified before Congress 4 times under oath with documentation. You want accountability? Start with your own words, Congresswoman. I've read your tweets. I've seen you call half the country fascist. Because they disagree with you. That's not oversight. That's theater." The silence was deafening. Not because it was loud, because it landed. On social media, the moment was already clipped, captioned, shared. Kash Patel shuts her down, calmly. What had started as AOC's interrogation was rapidly becoming a debate she couldn't control, and everyone watching knew it. Within 24 hours, the exchange between Kash Patel and AOC had become more than a viral moment. It was a cultural flashpoint. News outlets rushed to clip the exchange. Left-leaning anchors called it a dodge cloaked in patriotism. Conservative pundits labeled it a rare moment of spine in Washington. But the most powerful voice wasn't a journalist, it was the internet. Clips of Kash's calm takedown were racking up millions of views across TikTok, YouTube, and X. Hashtags like "John Patel destroys AOC" and "He had the receipts" trended worldwide. AOC's team scrambled. They issued a carefully worded statement. Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez stands by her line of questioning and remains committed to transparency and national accountability. But it didn't land. Why? Because the footage didn't lie, and for once the narrative didn't bend the way it usually did. Viewers weren't reacting to ideology. They were reacting to tone, authenticity, control. And in that hearing room, Kash had owned all of it. The late-night shows tried to mock the exchange, but even their audiences weren't laughing as loud. AOC's gotcha moment had been flipped on its head, and not with yelling or insults, but with facts, documents, questions she didn't expect. Meanwhile, Patel wasn't gloating. No media tour, no victory lap. Instead, he posted a single tweet. "Don't just listen to me. Watch the tape, read the docs, think for yourself." It was retweeted by journalists, veterans, teachers, even a few quietly disillusioned Democrats. Then something unexpected happened. AOC's own supporters started asking for full footage of the hearing. They didn't want the sound bites. They wanted the context. That had never happened before. And it shook the media gatekeepers. Because in a world built on controlling the story, Kash Patel had just handed it back to the people. Back inside the Hill, staffers whispered that the committee was reconsidering another round of questioning, not for Patel, but for the agencies he mentioned under oath. The story wasn't dying. It was evolving. And the next chapter would be written not by pundits, but by proof. Behind the podium and the tweets, AOC was fuming. Not because of a bad headline, she'd survived plenty. Not because she'd lost an argument, she'd danced through worse. But because this time, the control had slipped. And she knew it. In her office, aides shuffled around nervously. One handed her polling data. Youth engagement had dipped 5 points since the hearing. Another offered a damage control podcast appearance. She waved them both off. "It's not just what he said," she finally muttered. "It's how he said it. Calm, certain, like I was the one playing games." Because in that hearing, for the first time, Kash Patel hadn't just been a target. He had flipped the lens. And now, America was watching her with new eyes. Meanwhile, across town, Kash wasn't celebrating. He sat in a quiet D.C. cafe, black coffee in hand, laptop open, fielding dozens of interview requests, CNN, Fox, podcasts, independent outlets, all asking the same thing. How did you keep your cool? He ignored them. Instead, he drafted a follow-up statement, not for clout, for clarity. Facts don't scream, they don't posture. They sit patiently, waiting to be found. I didn't win anything, I just refused to lose to fiction. He hit send, posted it publicly, and that was it. No self-praise, no attacking her character, just letting the truth echo. But the noise didn't die. In fact, it grew. Former intelligence officials began sharing the hearing clip, citing its accuracy. Journalists quietly admitted they'd misread him. Even a few progressive columnists wrote cautiously positive op-eds, praising his measured tone in contrast to Washington's usual chaos. Inside the Beltway, something rare was happening. Kash Patel wasn't being dismissed. He was being listened to. And in AOC's camp, the cracks began to widen. Behind closed doors, a strategy memo was circulated. Reframe the moment as part of a broader attack on progressive values. Avoid direct confrontation. Translation? Don't go back to that hearing room. Don't let him speak again. He's too controlled. But it was too late. Because Kash Patel had already won something more valuable than airtime, credibility. And that, in Washington, was more dangerous than any viral clip. The full C-SPAN hearing upload had crossed 12 million views on YouTube. But it wasn't just the numbers that signaled something had changed. It was who was talking. For the first time, moderate Democrats were privately criticizing AOC's performance. One senior member of the caucus was overheard saying, if she wanted a soundbite, she picked the wrong guy to spar with. Others stayed quiet, but in D.C., silence was often louder than outrage. Kash Patel, on the other hand, said nothing, not a tweet, not a TV spot, and that, ironically, made everything louder. His silence wasn't confusion, it was precision. Cable networks replayed the clip on loop. Podcasts dissected every sentence. Columnists were split, some furious, others impressed. And still, Kash didn't blink. He didn't need to. The country was talking for him. Meanwhile, donors on both sides were taking notes. Conservative fundraisers saw Patel's composure as prime-time material. Progressive strategists, behind closed doors, admitted AOC had lost control of the narrative, a cardinal sin in their world. Then came the surprise. A prominent left-leaning legal scholar, known for her disdain for Trump-era officials, posted the clip with a caption no one expected. "Disagree with him all you want, but this is how testimony should look." The dam cracked. Voters who weren't usually engaged, independents, first-timers, even a chunk of disillusioned centrists, started asking, why haven't we heard this side before? AOC's team scrambled to pivot. They scheduled an interview, framed the exchange as proof of ongoing attacks on progressive voices. But it didn't stick. Not this time, because Kash Patel hadn't yelled. He hadn't accused. He had just shown up, unshaken, ready, documented, and in a city built on noise, his calm had cut through like a knife. This wasn't about who raised their voice, it was about who made the room listen. And right now, Washington and America was listening to him. By the following week, Kash Patel had gone from a niche name in political circles to a national figure, not because he sought the spotlight, but because he refused to flinch under it. Networks began referring to him simply as the guy who dismantled AOC on live TV. His face was plastered across thumbnails, and his words were quoted in newsletters across the ideological spectrum. The New York Times ran a headline that raised more than a few eyebrows. Measured, sharp, and unexpected, the Patel testimony that shifted a narrative. AOC, however, was experiencing the other side of the media coin. Her base remained loyal, but something was off. Her usual certainty on camera came with a subtle edge. Not her signature fire, but hesitation. In interviews, when pressed on Patel's testimony, she defaulted to generalities, not specifics, and viewers noticed. On Capitol Hill, committee members who once quietly dismissed Patel's prior work started requesting briefings with him. Off the record, some admitted they had underestimated his clarity. A few Republican strategists, never fans of his prior Trump-era bluntness, now whispered the same sentence. He's dangerous, but in a good way. Then came the internal leak, so an anonymous staffer from AOC's team shared a memo with Politico. We need to redirect. Direct confrontation with Patel is off the table. Focus on broader policy, not personalities. Translation, don't poke the fire again. But Kash didn't retreat. He took one carefully planned step forward. He agreed to sit down with a bipartisan podcast. Long form, unscripted, no talking points. Just one chair, one mic, and 2 hours of brutal honesty. I'm not here to make enemies, he said. But I won't let narratives bury the truth. And if people don't like that, that's politics. But facts don't bend just because you shout louder. The clip of that quote, trimmed and posted within minutes, shattered records. Not because it was dramatic, because it was real. AOC's brand had been built on fire and passion, but Kash had weaponized something she never saw coming. Stillness. And in the halls of power, that silence was deafening. By the time Monday rolled around, the headlines had shifted from scandal to something even more dangerous for AOC: silence. The kind of silence that fills a vacuum when the usual defenders fall quiet. Progressive outlets that once echoed her every soundbite now treaded carefully. Even MSNBC, her usual media ally, ran a panel asking, did Kash Patel just redefine how Republicans communicate? It wasn't praise, but it wasn't dismissal either, and that mattered. Kash had become a symbol, not just for conservatives hungry for a coherent voice, but for independents tired of chaos. He was the anti-performance performer, sharp, still, unshaken. And that aura, that discipline, was unsettling to those who thrived in spectacle. AOC's inner circle felt the shift too. Behind the glass walls of her district office, aides debated how to counter the fallout. One wanted an emotional video response. Another pitched a college town tour to reconnect with grassroots Gen Z voters. But nothing landed, because this time the attack didn't come with insults or scandal. It came wrapped in calm and cold, unshakable evidence. Kash wasn't tweeting, he wasn't doing interviews, he wasn't showing up at CPAC rallies. He was simply present, and that unnerved the machine. Meanwhile, the clip of his testimony continued to spread like wildfire. It was now being used in classroom discussions about media bias. Military veterans posted it with captions like, "Finally, someone said it plainly." AOC tried to regain ground. She held a round table on disinformation. Ironically, it backfired when a student journalist asked if selective outrage was a form of misinformation too. The room fell quiet. The moment trended. On Capitol Hill, GOP leaders who once saw Kash as too blunt for prime time now saw something else: discipline, and they liked it. Senators began requesting private briefings. Donors started asking if Patel would consider a state-level run. In think tanks and dinner parties, the whispers began, what if Kash isn't just a disruptor? What if he's the prototype? Meanwhile, AOC started skipping press events. Her once dominant social presence was noticeably quieter. She wasn't retreating, but she wasn't charging either. Something had shifted, and her team knew it. And through all of it, Kash stayed the course. No rants, no retweets, just results. He released one more document, a declassified email chain about National Guard deployment. It confirmed his timeline. It silenced another wave of critics. By the end of the week, a new headline emerged, this time from an unexpected outlet. AOC challenged Patel and lost the audience. This wasn't the story anyone expected, but it was the one unfolding, moment by moment, frame by frame, and the ending? Still unwritten. The invitation wasn't official, it wasn't even extended through a network. It came from a small, independent news outlet with just enough credibility to matter and just enough edge to pull it off. AOC and Kash Patel, face-to-face, live. At first, her team rejected it outright. No upside, they warned. He doesn't fight with fire, he buries you with silence. But AOC wasn't one to back down, especially not with her reputation wobbling beneath her, especially not with Patel rising in polls he wasn't even part of. She accepted. Kash didn't blink. "Let's make it about the facts," he said. "No audience. No spin." But the studio knew better. They booked a mid-sized venue, enough to create tension, small enough to feel personal. The seats filled in under an hour, lights up, cameras ready. The two sat across from each other, no desk between them, just two chairs, a clock, and a moderator who barely got past the first question before the sparks began. AOC led with fire. "Mr. Patel, your testimony has been called dangerous, misleading. What do you say to people who claim you've traded truth for politics?" Kash didn't raise his voice. He didn't even shift in his seat. "I'd say they haven't read the documents I submitted, and if facts are now dangerous, then maybe the problem isn't the messenger." The moderator blinked. The room froze. AOC leaned in harder. "You've accused members of Congress, what myself included, of manipulating intelligence. That's a serious claim." Kash nodded once. And yet, no one's refuted the record. That line, simple, sharp, cut through every headline, every tweet, every spin cycle before it, and the audience knew it. AOC countered with emotion, stories, constituent concerns, outrage. But each time, Kash brought it back to data, testimony, and timelines. He wasn't passionate, he was surgical, and it worked. Social media lit up, not with memes or mockery, but with shock. Clips showed a composed Kash holding firm, while AOC, usually the most agile speaker in the room, seemed thrown off balance, searching for footing in a fight she thought she'd already won. Then came the moment no one scripted. AOC paused, looked directly at him. "Do you really believe I'm the enemy?" A long silence. Kash looked back, steady, measured. "Number, I think you're wrong, but I don't need to hate you to say it." That sentence, it broke the feed, because in an era fueled by personal attacks and tribal rage, that wasn't just a line, it was a crack of light. Even AOC froze. Not out of defeat, but maybe, just maybe, out of respect. The moderator ended it early. Nothing else needed to be said. Outside the studio, people were already arguing who won, what it meant, whether it would change anything. But in the room, something rare had happened. Two forces collided, and instead of fire, they left clarity behind. The broadcast ended without fireworks. No victory speeches, no viral walk-offs, just two people standing up, shaking hands and walking out of frame. But what followed was louder than anything they could have said. The clip of that final moment, the silence, the exchange, the humanity, was shared more than the entire hearing combined. Not because it was dramatic, because it wasn't. That night, across political feeds and late-night shows, pundits didn't know how to spin it. There were no clear sides, no knockout, just a conversation that shouldn't have worked, but did, and that made it even more dangerous. Kash Patel's name began trending, not just on political sites, but across lifestyle platforms, college forums, and unexpected corners of the internet. He wasn't just being quoted anymore, he was being studied. AOC's critics softened, some unwillingly, not because they agreed with her, but because she stayed in the room. She didn't storm out, she didn't spiral. She held her ground and in doing so, regained a measure of respect that headlines alone couldn't buy. But the bigger story? The mood shifted. For years, the noise machine rewarded the loudest, angriest voice in the room. Now, viewers were asking for something else. Receipts, calm, accountability. Not rage tweets and sound bites, substance. And Kash had become the unlikely messenger for it. By the end of the week, the clip had been used in a university leadership seminar. A conservative columnist wrote, "This is the tone shift we've begged for." A liberal activist tweeted, "Disagree with him completely, but that's how you show up." For his part, Kash didn't capitalize. No merchandise, no campaign tease. He simply returned to his work, submitting documentation, briefing panels, avoiding the circus. That restraint, it made him louder. And for AOC, she recalibrated, less performative moments, more policy depth. Her next speech didn't go viral, but it landed. Her critics still circled, but her base stood taller. Because when you stand in the storm and don't flinch, even your enemies take notice. In the end, this story wasn't about who was right. It was about how the game changed when two people actually showed up to play it without screaming. And that, more than anything, was what people remembered. In a world driven by outrage, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stay calm. Kash Patel didn't raise his voice, he raised the standard. AOC didn't back down, she showed up. And for once, politics wasn't about noise. It was about showing who's ready when the cameras fade. This wasn't just a debate, it was a turning point.